All right, we're live.
All right. I think we'll just wait for a couple of minutes. I can see 6 attendees right now. So maybe start by 7:05.
No problem.
Right. So I think we can start. So hello, good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing great this evening. Welcome to our third graduate live series. My name is Neha Danial, and I am a third-year civil engineering student at Heriot University. I'm also the treasurer at the iStructE UAE Young Members Group. Kindly note that the session is being recorded and we're live on YouTube as well. So if you're uncomfortable with the same, please refrain from switching on your cameras and your microphone. So before we get started, I would like to give you all an introduction about these series. So these sessions are organized by the Young Members Group in the UAE and are primarily dedicated for the students and young engineers. And it's aimed to bridge the gap between students and graduates and the industry who study civil and structural engineering and the industry. So as the name suggests, we have a recent graduate engineer joining us every session to share their experiences and discuss about their work, about their studies, about their challenges, and so on. And they also talk about their journey with the iStructE and how that benefited their career development as well. So we hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature and we'll address them towards the end of the session. So Without further ado, I would like to introduce and welcome our speaker, Husain Bensaud. So Husain is a graduate engineer at HBL Associates UK and is also the chair of the Lancashire and Cheshire Young Members Group. And he's also a member of the prestigious iStruct Young Members panel. And I would also like to point out that this is our first collaboration event, and I'm really happy that we're doing this. So thank you, Husain, for being here today.
No problem. It's a real pleasure to be joining you today, Neha. I think from my perspective personally, I've been following your progress at the Young Members Group in the UAE, and I've been really impressed with the strides that you've made over the past while, despite all of the challenges of COVID. So I'm really excited to be with you today.
Thank you. We appreciate that. So, yeah.
Is it worth saying a bit about myself?
Sure.
So if I'm to introduce myself, my name is Husain Bensaud. I'm a graduate engineer for HBL Associates. We're based in the UK, and the large majority of our projects are nationwide in the UK, with the odd projects elsewhere overseas. I'm a graduate of the University of Manchester, where I did my bachelor's. And then I went on to do a master's in structural engineering at the University of Salford, both of them here local in Manchester. And I've been involved with the iStruct for a good few years now. And at the moment, I'm the chair of the Lancashire and Cheshire Young Members Group. And as you've said, I'm a member of the iStruct Young Members panel. I think that'll suffice for who I am.
Yes, that's great. So you mentioned that you did your civil engineering first, and then you went on to structural engineering. So how was that journey?
Yes. Right. So to give you a bit of background, for me personally, I went into civil engineering knowing that I want to be a structural engineer. Because growing up, I've always been fascinated by building sites. And asking people around me, what do I need to be involved on building site? I was told that I need to be an architect. So growing up, I always told people that that's what I want to be. I want to be an architect. When it came to actual university, I had to do a bit of research, and I found out that architects don't do the numbers and the physics behind making buildings stand. So I had to scratch my head a bit and figure out who does that, and found out that structural engineers are who do that job, and it's what I wanted to do all along. So I joined a civil engineering degree at the University of Manchester, always knowing that I want to be a structural engineer at the end. There you go. That's my journey.
Right. So you were sure that you wanted to do structural engineering. So civil engineering was just a path to help you. So do you have any other fields in mind, or was it structures only?
To be fair, I just knew that I wanted to do structural engineering. I did find other topics also fascinating during my studies of civil engineering. I enjoyed hydraulics. Geotechnics, I never fully understood it. I always thought it was a bit of a dark art, but I was also equally fascinated by it. But to be honest, I knew that I wanted to be a structural engineer. And I sort of always picked my subjects knowing that I want to be geared towards a structural engineering profession.
Right. Okay. So I agree with you. Even now, I'm in my third year, like I said. So even structures is something that we all are passionate about in our year as well. And so did you do any internships during your studies, or?
So after my second year, I did an internship inside the university. There were research internships on offer at the University of Manchester. So I did one of those. It was very beneficial. Any work experience at all is invaluable experience. So anything that you can do during your studies, it is worth doing. But I think the very best type of experience is when you're exposed to what you want to do after your degree. So after second year, I had that research project. That was fun and enjoyable. I learned loads, but it wasn't my most important internship, if I put it that way. After my third year, I joined HBL Associates, where I work now, as a summer intern. So bachelor's degrees in the UK are 3 years. So I had finished my bachelor's and I knew I wanted to do a master's the year after, but I spent the summer working for HBL. That was invaluable. I can't stress enough how useful that was, both for my master's and for my personal development as well. I started on the job, I was thrown in the deep end, and I just started learning day to day. So by the time I joined my master's, I was ahead of other students with me who've not had any experience. The master's course at Salford University is very practical and very hands-on. It was very beneficial to have that experience from the industry going into the master's. And I was able to always reflect on what I was being taught compared to what I was doing day to day. So that was extremely invaluable.
So you think it's important to work for some time before you even go into a master's degree? Is that what you would recommend?
I think so, to be fair. What I personally did was I joined HBL for an internship after my bachelor's, but then I also stayed on with them during my master's. So I was doing my master's full time. And the way that my timetable worked out was I had 2 full-time days of lectures every week. So I had Mondays and Wednesdays of 9 to 6 lectures, and that gave me Tuesday in between to revise. But I took the Thursday and Friday of every week attending HBL part-time. So I was both studying for a full-time master's, but applying everything I'm learning day to day right away every week. So I'd say definitely it is worth having some experience before jumping into a master's, because it just gives you that little bit of perspective that you need, I think, because you learn so much in your undergraduate degree, but you don't necessarily reflect there and then in the lecture about how you can apply these things. But when you've faced questions in the industry and then you see the answers in a lecture theatre, you really switch on and you really absorb it so well, knowing where you can apply it later on. So I think it's really worthwhile having some experience before going to a master's.
So that must have been a challenging year for you, balancing both a full-time degree and a job. So how did that work out? Was that challenging?
It was, for sure. So that was 2019. It really was a very full timetable for me. I was doing the full-time master's. I was working part-time with HBL, but also I was the vice chair of the Young Members Group in Lancashire and Cheshire. And I was helping out with events for the ICE Graduates and Students Northwest Committee. And I was also contributing to something called EFOD, Engineers for Overseas Development, where we were designing a coffee processing plant in Uganda. All of them were super fun to be involved in and super beneficial. So I took loads away from the year 2019. I didn't just get a master's degree, but I got master's degree, experience with work, and exposure to a large network of people through EFOD, ICE, and iStruct. Right. But what I want to be completely transparent in stressing to our attendees today is you need to take things at your own pace. 2019 for me, it was a very, very busy year, but I think I might have oversubscribed. So I could manage it for the 12 months in 2019, but I thought it was a lot of pressure a lot of the time because I had oversubscribed to loads of things at the same time. So I think it's really important to always keep an eye on your mental well-being and on your workload. So it's all great, and you should, where you can, subscribe to extracurricular stuff, get out there, do as much activities as you can. But at the same time, be mindful that you do need your own space and you do need time to rest and relax. And that is all equally as important as other stuff that you're doing. So for me, I've been on both ends of the spectrum. Early on in my university, I was sort of just attending lectures, and that was pretty much all I did. Which isn't great because you should get involved in extracurricular stuff. But at the very end of the spectrum, by the time I was in my master's, I was involved in so many things that I didn't really have any free time whatsoever. And I think that's also not right. So I think graduates and students should always seek to strike a balance between work life and just normal life. Make sure you're relaxing, you've got time for yourself, but also do as much as you can without straining your abilities.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. It's important to strike that balance to ensure that we have.
So.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned that you got your job right after you finished. Was it the internship that led to a permanent job as a graduate engineer?
Yes. Yeah. And that's another benefit of internships, actually. The way I came across HBL was quite funny, actually, because I had, by the end of my let's give the attendees some perspective. So I'm an international student in the UK, and finding work as an international in the UK is a bit tough. Whoever your employer is, they're having to go through extra paperwork to bring you on board compared to employing a home student. So graduating as an international in the UK is a bit tough because the job market isn't necessarily geared towards employing internationals. So it was kind of a bit of a stressful time by the end of my bachelor's degree because I was applying everywhere and trying to get a job somewhere. But through involvement with the iStruct, through involvement with the Young Members Group, I was regularly attending events, meeting people, just making sure that I'm there in the professional network and just getting my face known around. So I started, the more events that I did, I was just recognizing different engineers from different offices. I was actually attending meetings inside structural engineering offices. And at one point I was organizing a quiz. And I was a student at the time organizing a quiz for engineers who were attending. It was a mix of graduates, students, and other members of the iStruct. And I was just sort of going around the tables, introducing myself, making sure the attendees are all doing all right and making some conversation. And on one of the tables, there was Liam Massey, who's now my director at work. He was associate director at HBL at the time. And we just started speaking. We were reflecting about different events that we had been to, and we were just having a casual conversation. And then at some point, he just turned to me and said, "Would you like to work for us?" So that's sort of how my journey started with HBL. Sent him my CV, he said, coming for an internship, went through 3 months of an internship, then worked part-time through my master's. And I've been with them ever since. So that's really a very major benefit for me from being involved in the institution. It really gives you access to a wide network of people that you need to progress your career. You start to get to know people, you start to build your people skills, you start to build communication skills, and you never know where your network would take you.
Yes. So yeah, like you said, I think it's very important that we have a good network, and it's important to attend these events. But I think this year has been quite challenging for us since all these events have gone online. We're not able to meet in person and network like we used to do.
Yes, I largely sympathize with graduates of 2020 and 2021. I think you've been dealt a very difficult hand, but I'm sure you'll manage just fine.
So do you think that's a challenge right now?
Yes, for sure. I mean, for me personally, attending face-to-face meetings, getting to know people, being there in lectures and seminars was invaluable, both sort of within the university and in extracurricular stuff, such as attending iStruct meetings, etc. That face-to-face experience, I really miss it now. And it was just invaluable during my studies. So I think it's certainly a massive challenge, but there is a silver lining. I mean, just looking at you guys and what you've been doing in the Young Members Group, I've been super impressed, and I think some of the things that have come out of COVID and lockdown are really positive. Just this collaboration today is an example. I'm sitting here in Manchester talking to you in Dubai.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have necessarily happened if we weren't for
Yes.
COVID. So ups and downs, but I think definitely a massive challenge. So good luck to you all.
Yeah, and since we're on the topic of challenges, what are some of the challenges that you may have faced as a fresh graduate?
Right. I think specific to me personally, as an international, I think one of the very big challenges was getting a job in the UK, because as I explained, it is difficult for employers to justify to themselves why they're taking on an international that needs visa sponsorship, and a load of paperwork, when they can take an equally qualified, equally capable home student. So it was a matter of making sure that you stand out, that you're out there, to the point where it is justifiable to an employer to take you on despite the extra work. So I think that was my personal experience, but I think nowadays it goes for everyone, really. You're really having to make sure that you stand out, be that through your LinkedIn account, through your networks, or through any networking events that are on around you that you're joining. You really need to make sure that you stand out there, because the job won't come to you. You have to go and find it. So I think I'd say that was the biggest challenge for me after graduating.
Right, okay. And can you talk about some of the projects that you maybe worked on? Is there a specific project that you're particularly proud of?
Well, we do all sorts, to be honest, at HBL. We're in almost every sector. We work on education buildings, we do public and private sector, we do commercial, we do loads in entertainment. So we work on amusement parks, and we facilitate buildings around roller coasters and things like that. Now, a lot of our work is covered in NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. I'm not too sure how much I can discuss, but one project that I've particularly enjoyed working on recently was a project overseas. It's not in the UK. And the crux of it is we're having to support a ride that applies cyclical loads on an existing structure. So I was having to sort of really dive into the design codes and make sure that I fully grasped the rules behind cyclical loads and fatigue assessment. And I had to design a structure from scratch to support this ride, and make sure that we get it past our QA process. So that was particularly fun, I think, because I really had to go sort of that extra mile in terms of the technical design. It wasn't just another project. It was one where I really had to go away, do some reading, and come back and solve the problem. So I think I really enjoy those type of projects.
Right. It's very interesting to know that structural engineers are also involved in things like roller coasters and amusement parks. I think most of us a lot of us tend to think it's only about the buildings and the structures that we see, but it's interesting to find out that it's even about the amusement parks, and it can be interesting as like that. Right?
Yes, totally. I mean, once you really start looking around, we're involved in everything, because almost everything is a structure, and almost everything needs to be stable and withstand the loads that are applied on it. So I think we certainly don't give ourselves enough credit as structural engineers in how much we affect the built environment around us.
Right, yes. So that was all about your experience. So let's talk about the institution. So
yes.
Were you involved with the iStruct from university? I think you mentioned that you were involved towards your final years and in your master level. So how were you introduced to the organization and how has it helped you in reaching so far?
Yeah. So I was first introduced, you sort of hear about the IStructE and the ICE and all these institutions, but I think they feel a bit remote. They feel sort of removed from your day-to-day life. It's not something that you'd ever really picture yourself being at the heart of. But really, all it was, a friend of mine said that he'd recently become a student representative at the local IStructE Young Members Group. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. Could I become one as well? And I said, well, I'll go ask the committee and let you know. And he came back and he said, yeah, there's another spot for a student representative. So I attended the first couple of meetings, and as I said, I started meeting people, started going into different offices in Manchester. And that was sort of how I started my involvement with the institution. And since then, I've just been helping out with events, going out, meeting people. And in the process, I became a vice chair of the group and then the chair this year. And I've sort of been trying to get more and more involved at IStructE HQ as well, and not just in the regional committees. I became a member of the Young Members panel at HQ. And that's sort of where we look at the young membership of our institution at a more holistic view, sort of looking at the bigger picture rather than just the regional affairs. So I find that really fulfilling. And a role that I took on most recently is the role of facilitating between the IStructE and an organization called Chain. Now, I'm not sure if you'd recognize Chain. They actually had an event in Dubai. They're like a platform to bring together people from different professional engineering institutions and just get them talking all in the same place. And what I'm trying to do now is sort of be the IStructE representation within Chain, just facilitating that dialogue between the two organizations. So I think to everyone listening, I think just get involved, even if it's a student representative as a general member of your local young members group. Just get your foot in the door, and then you really don't know where you'll go. Step by step, you'll find yourself in amazing places.
So yeah, like you said, I would agree that it's important to get involved with these institutions. So to all the students in the audience, I would like to point out that you can register to become a student member for free in case you're not one yet. And even for the graduates, you can register for a graduate membership. I've posted the links in the chat. And if you do face any difficulties with the same, do let us know and we'll be happy to help out. And so talking more about the institution. So in terms of resources, how does the institute, do you find the resources useful for your studies, maybe during some of your projects or dissertation, maybe? So how did
Yes, for sure.
Sorry.
They're not just useful for my studies, to be fair. I did use them loads. A particular shout out to the IStructE technical guidance notes. If you just go on the IStructE website and search for technical guidance notes, they're like a few pages of first technical explanation and then a worked example at the end, taking a different subject each time. And those have been amazing during my studies because they really help they build your technical understanding first, and then they give you a worked example so you can practice it yourself. Those have been not just useful in my studies, but also useful when I started work. As a structural engineer, your practice will have some software that you can use to design different things. But as an engineer, it's so important that you're able to really interrogate whatever software you're using and make sure that you have sort of an expectation of what results you should be getting,
right,
so that you know if the model or the analysis is telling you the right things. So the technical guidance notes, which are free for members, have been really, really useful because I can just go back, have a read, practice the example, and then use my software and make sure that I'm getting similar results. So those have been really good. But not just them, there's a whole host of material available. There's the Essential Knowledge series. Those are really good. They're like a series of mini booklets that talk about different things. My favorite is stability. So if you go again on the Astructy website, Essential Knowledge series and stability, that's really informative. And of course the magazine, it's just so insightful. Each edition has sort of a different taste to it, and it's just so good for keeping up with the industry, and then it really keeps you at the very cutting edge of where our profession is, which I think is important in this day and age. That's a bit about the resources that you get access to.
Right. Yes, I really look forward to the magazine every month, so that it's really interesting to read. Especially, it gives you day-to-day knowledge of what's happening around you, and it's not just within your region; it can be international as well.
Totally.
Yeah. So, how has it been working with the YMG? You did mention some points about the young members panel. So, can you give a regional audience an insight about what you do in Lancashire and Cheshire?
Right. So, I suppose, unlike yourselves, in Lancashire and Cheshire is a very old branch. Next year will be the 100th year for our regional group. So it's a very old regional group of the institution. So I can't speak for the majority of its history, but I've been involved with it for the past few years. And we put on all sorts of events. When pre-COVID, we were doing regular site visits, quizzes, lectures, networking sessions. So we were extremely busy with all sorts of events here in Lancashire and Cheshire. Then going into COVID, to be fair, I think we've not done as well as yourselves in maintaining sort of our really busy schedule. Pre-COVID, we were doing 26 events in one calendar year. So that was one event every 2 weeks, while they became a lot lesser going into lockdown. But as a group ourselves, we're around 25 members, I think, of the committee. And our local membership is over 1,000 of graduates and students. So that's us. Not sure how much more I could tell you.
Yeah, that's great. I think we were the young, and we were thrown right into the pandemic. So
Yes.
We had to explore our options, and that's what helped us do well, like you said. So are there any other skills that you would think that's good to develop at an early stage, maybe some softwares?
Do you mean generally as a structural engineer?
Generally, yes.
Yes. So I think if you're a student with a bit of free time, it's always worth picking up a software. So many of the available softwares, they actually have free membership for, free licenses for students. So I think it's really worth making use of those and just have a read on the industry around you. So here in the UK, for example, I think a very good software that most structural engineering students should have some exposure to during their studies is Tekla Structural Designer. Now, this is a software package that's used widely here in the UK. I'm not sure if it is used in the UAE, but I think have a look around you, see what practices are using. And it's just so good to have that on your CV going into an interview, just to say, well, that software that you work with, I've actually done this and this and that with it. So you can hit the ground running when you join the practice. And that's really something that employers look to.
Right.
And even if you happen to learn a software that's not used by the practice that you want to work at, it still shows that proactiveness. It shows that you've gone out of your way to learn something extra that wasn't necessarily in your curriculum. So I think it really is worthwhile learning softwares. As structural engineers, you want to learn, I think it's a very good skill to have some drafting experience. So be that AutoCAD, SketchUp, Revit, but also you want some analysis software. So maybe FE analysis, ANSYS, Tekla, structural designer, Robot by Autodesk. There's a whole host of software packages out there. And it's really worth trying to gain some experience on them before joining work.
Right. And what about soft skills? Are soft skills equally important as...
Oh yes, for sure. Because any practice, they'll obviously want someone who can handle software and someone who can draw drawings or design buildings. But if you can't get in a meeting room and speak with clients, then really you can't progress in the profession. So it's so important. I think I dare say it's actually more important than the technical stuff. It really is that important to just make sure that you have those soft skills. Go out there, meet people, learn how to network, and just make sure that as much as you can, you're comfortable, be that in presentations. One thing that I try and do whenever I'm giving the opportunity to present, I just say yes. And a lot of the time, just before the event, I find myself regretting it because I need to prepare all these slides or do this or do that.
Right.
But after I do the event, I find it really fulfilling. And I just think, well, that was really worthwhile. And you find that you really learn a lot while preparing to develop your soft skills. So I think super important, definitely worthwhile developing.
Right, I would definitely agree, because when I did my first presentation, I still remember how nervous I was, but as events progress, you actually gain confidence to go. So I think it's important to attend these events and hold events so you gain better confidence and presentations. So it's more like saying yes to an opportunity than declining it, right?
Totally. And it's just practice. It's just, we're all very nervous at the start, but then you just do it enough times to just be happy doing it anytime.
Right. So I'm a bit conscious of the time, so I just wanted to point to the audience that if you have any questions, please put it on the question and answer session, and we'll try to answer it at the end. So before we conclude, is there anything that you wish someone would have told you as a student that you maybe realize later on in your career, something that you might regret maybe? Is there anything of that sort?
I think I don't regret it, because I think I did realize it sort of towards the end of my studies. Starting university, I sort of approached university with a school mentality, thinking it's just about getting those top grades. It's just about getting the very best grades that you can get. But really, as I went on through university, there was a shift in mentality. It was, you definitely need to maintain the excellent marks as much as you can. But at the same time, university and real life is about so much more than your grades. So if you're doing well in university, well done, keep it going. If you're not, try harder, but don't ever think that that's what real life is about. Academic excellence is all important, but at the same time, you need to develop all those soft skills that we were talking about. When I was when I was still getting to know HBL, something, for example, that came up, I was asked about my studies, and I'm en route to a first-class degree. Great. How about the ISTRAC-T? I'm the vice chair of the group. Excellent. But I was asked, well, what do you do aside from that, and I was able to reflect on going horse riding at university. We have a horse riding club at the University of Manchester. And just doing that was something that came up in conversation and something that was worth doing. So I think my advice would be certainly aim for academic excellence, but make sure that you diversify. Make sure that you're getting up to activities. Make sure that that's not all that you're doing, because ultimately that's not what's going to matter the most when you leave university.
Right. That was very insightful. I think personally, for me as well, that's good knowledge to actually get on with extracurricular activities
Yes.
and get involved. Right. So just pointing out to the attendees, if there are any questions, please post them in. So that's actually it from my side. I've asked all the questions that I wanted to.
Good
Is there
stuff.
anything? Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to tell our attendees?
I think I've just noticed a question. What advice would you give students or fresh graduates to grow their network during the pandemic? I think that's a really difficult one. It's just such a challenge. Growing your network, it's a lot easier, I find, when it's face-to-face. But graduates and students now are faced with the challenge of wanting to meet people, but at the same time not being able to do it physically. So I think make the most of the events that are put on around you, be that through the ISTRAC or other organizations. Make sure that you're making the most out of them. And at the same time, it never really hurts to just get on LinkedIn, make sure you're active, and sometimes approach people. Loads of people on LinkedIn are happy to just have a 15-minute discussion with you if you're interested about what they're currently doing or about their role. So I think it's worthwhile, if there's someone that you're interested in talking to, just send them a message, introduce yourself, say you'd like to discuss this, do you have 10 minutes? And it's just so easy. So I think that's my best advice. LinkedIn is very, very good. Try to make the most of it, and don't be afraid to approach people to have a casual discussion.
And I think the graduate members are the easiest people to approach. They're people of your same age who you can talk to comfortably. And that's the whole aim of this session as well, where the students can ask questions without fearing them, or have an open conversation with the recent graduates, right?
Yes.
So I think we have one more question. What is the most challenging project that you have worked on?
Again, sadly covered in NDAs, but I think it's this one about cyclical loading and fatigue, because so the project, as I've explained, was to support a ride for an amusement park, and the ride was applying cyclical loads on the existing structure, and I was sort of tasked with designing an interface structure between the ride and the existing structure. And it was a complete blank canvas. It wasn't sort of, with most jobs, an architect will have had a stab at forming the building traditionally, and then you sort of come in and justify it structurally and put columns and beams and stability systems where you need them. But with this one, it's a complete blank canvas. I remember early on, one of the things that I got was sort of the a drawing of the ride and the existing building and a complete blank area in between, and it was just designed that for these loads. So I think that was super challenging. Definitely took loads of reading through the codes of practice. Here in the UK, we're using Eurocodes. So it took a lot of reading about fatigue analysis in Eurocode. So that was challenging, but equally fulfilling to go through.
And you also mentioned about working with architects and how it's a collaborative effort. So how has that been?
That's something that I've always been fascinated about. Sort of the built environment really is a result of the collaboration of so many parties, the M&E engineers, the structural engineers, the civils, and the architects. They're all sort of coming together to provide the client with this end product. So it's definitely been, I think, most of the time, a good architect will have some understanding of structural engineering, and a good structural engineer will also have a good understanding of what the architect is trying to achieve. And a lot of the times these things do contradict each other. So if the architect wants an uninterrupted view without any columns, it's sort of, it falls upon you as the structural engineer to try and really push physics to achieve it. You're really sort of trying your best within, a lot of the time, budget constraints from the client come in, and you're having to really work within loads of constraints to give the architect and ultimately the client what they want. And that relationship, it just has to be a backwards and forward relationship between the engineers and the architects, making sure that you're always meeting in the middle between what's physically possible from the structural engineer's perspective and what delivers the message and the artistic intent of the architect as well.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
It's good to get some insight. So, because I've always wondered how the team effort actually comes in to play in when we actually see the structure. So I think we have a couple of other questions. I'm sure you can see it on the chat. So John says, happy bank holiday.
Thank you very much. Definitely been enjoying the sun. It's been sunny, unusually sunny in Manchester.
And I think there's a question from John as well. What advice would you give to young professional engineers about the benefits of joining a YMG would be?
I think, so as two examples, in the Lancashire and Cheshire members group, both myself and the chair of the group before me, both found our jobs through being involved in the committee. I found HBL organizing a quiz, and the person that I'm thinking of joined Ramble through attending a lecture. So I think the very biggest benefit is the network that you get access to. You get access to a whole host of people, from students to graduates to directors of practices. And that's the most invaluable benefit that you get. But besides that, again, we were talking about the importance of soft skills. Joining the committee is a classic example of a roundtable discussion. And it's the same thing. The meeting minutes, the meeting agenda are the same format that'll come up when you're in real life dealing with clients. So you'll be dealing with architects, clients, a roundtable discussion, and it's just really the very same format. The similarity is actually striking. As a student going through the membership with the committee and then going into practice, I just found myself really comfortable sitting around the table with other people because I've done it before. So I think those are the main benefits from joining the committee. So 100% recommend it. Get yourself involved.
Right. I hope we get to see many more members joining us in the UAE. Yeah. And we have a question from Josh. He said, love your views. How does one deal with getting many rejections from firms? Furthermore, when you get rejected without even reaching the interview stage?
I think don't get deterred. It's totally okay. It says nothing about you personally. Never take a rejection personally. I think a good employer should always strive to give feedback. It's so important to give those applicants a bit of feedback about why you thought they're not the right fit for the vacancy that you have on. But where that's not been provided, so in the case where you have been provided with feedback, make sure that you take it constructively and build on it. If you had any weaknesses, go and amend them, then try again. And if you weren't given any feedback, just do not take it personally and was personally rejected for one reason or another. But then you really will find your path. And when you do, it'll just be all worthwhile. Working with HBL today is just something that I enjoy so much, and I know that it was worth any sort of trouble I went through in trying to find work. So I think my main point is don't get deterred by rejections. They say nothing about you, and just keep going and you'll hit the jackpot for sure.
Thank you. I hope that answers Josh's question. Attendees, if you have any more questions, please drop them onto the chat box. We have 5 attendees currently, but I think like Inas said, most of them would just watch the recording later and come back with questions. So, oh, we have 9 on YouTube as well. So that's great.
Excellent, good stuff.
So for our attendees, I would like to point out that we have a lot of these events coming up. We have a CPD event organized by the regional group on Wednesday, 7th of April. And we have a software workshop coming up on the 11th. So all details about these events are usually given on our Instagram page. So make sure you follow us, and so you get the detailed updates. And if you have any questions about the membership, or if you have any difficulties while registering, or if you have any more questions for Husain, please get in touch with us. I'll send in our email ID as well as the links to our Instagram page. So make sure you follow us and feel free to let us know, and we'll be happy to help you out.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Neha, I'm happy replying to messages on LinkedIn. If people, for any reason, want to get in touch, definitely perfectly happy speaking to people.
That's great. We appreciate that. Okay, I think we have one more question. As a fresh graduate with no industry experience, what are the things you would recommend they know before stepping into the industry? Things like technical or non-technical skills which aren't taught at the university.
I think in the university's defense, there's only so much that they can teach you, especially if you were doing a civil engineering degree, because civil engineering just covers so much, and it's just such a broad topic that I think students really need to hone in on their own interests in their own times. So I think it's really worth looking into the industry that you're looking to join. If you are looking to become a structural engineer, then an excellent way of doing this is just reading the magazine. Get your free student membership with the iStruct, gain access to the online issue of the magazine, and just make sure you're staying up to date. It'll look really impressive. It doesn't matter if you're joining a multinational company. If you're joining one of the big players, they definitely recognize the institution, and they'll be able to interrogate you further on how you've been involved and what you've been reading, etc. But even if you're trying to join a very small practice that I've never heard about the iStruct, it'll be really impressive for you to just introduce them to the iStruct. You'll be able to say, this is an international body that upholds the integrity of the profession. I've been subscribing to their magazine. I've been reading it. I'm sort of aware of the very cutting edge of where our profession is, and that's what I can bring to the table. Don't be afraid from sort of overselling yourself. Don't think that you're not good enough. If you have been reading the magazine, then you really have a lot of knowledge about what's happening in the world. So don't be afraid to say, well, this is my opinion about this topic. This is what I think about sustainability. This is how I think engineering practices should try to reduce their net carbon emissions. This is how I think an engineer in this day and age should approach structural design. So I think don't be afraid of overselling yourself, and make sure that as much as you can, you're reading about the field that you want to go into outside what you're being taught in university.
Yes, that's insightful. I think we touched upon this as well with the development of soft skills as well. That helps you to attain that. So
totally. And another thing actually is the certificate in structural engineering behavior. It's, if you're a student member, you get a discount. So do it while you can now. Get the free student membership again and get on that certificate. It's just such an insightful thing. It really does test your understanding of structural behavior, and attaining that certificate again is something that you can go into interviews with and say, I've been tested on my knowledge of structural behavior by the iStruct. This is my certificate. I know what I'm doing. So those sort of things are really worthwhile. And I think even experienced engineers will scratch their heads trying to answer some of the questions in that test. So really worthwhile doing.
And I think the test has a discount for students, and you have an unlimited number of tries before you take the actual test, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, so you gain, as a student, you get free access to the to a bank of questions that you can just keep practicing on as much as you want before your actual test slot. On the day, I think you get given 2 hours and you're supervised remotely. And it really does test your understanding. You will have to do quite a bit of practicing before having a go at it.
All right. I think that's it from the audience. I don't see any more questions coming up. So I think we'll just give them a minute in case. Okay, let's just. All right, so I think if there are no more questions, thank you, Husain, for joining us today. It was an insightful session, and I'm sure the audience would agree with me as well. Thank you for taking your time out, and I would like to thank you on behalf of our entire team.
Thank you very much, Neha. I think it's been such a pleasure joining you. As I said, I'm all too fond of the activities that you've been doing in the UAE. I think you're an awesome young members group, and you've got a lot to show for yourselves. So well done, and keep it up. You're very impressive.
Thank you for that. And I thank you all. Thank you to the attendees for taking your time out and attending this session. And like I mentioned, if you have any further questions, do let us know and we'll be happy to help you out. So I guess that's it from my side. Have a great evening and goodbye.